In the last few months, we have witnessed unprecedented events that affected the world and changed the way it functions. But one thing it didn't change, the need to protect your sensitive data. Today, we will talk about data security and data privacy controls and how Seclore is the right solution for you. Seclore is a data-centric security platform helping organizations protecting their most sensitive data, no matter where it goes and no matter how it's being transferred. With more than 2,000 customers globally across 29 countries, headquartered in Silicon Valley, with offices in Germany, India, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Today, Seclore is presenting to you a session titled Security and Privacy When Confidential Data Goes Out in the Open. With you today, Mohamed Djenane, and I am the security consultant here in Seclore. So, one of the main questions is who is responsible for data privacy? Now, Salesforce conducted a survey to its customers, and 46% said that they feel that they lost control on their data. Now, who should be responsible to maintain this data privacy? Is it government? Is it individual? Is it companies? What do you think? Now, in a survey that Cisco conducted, it indicates that 45%, approximately 45% of the respondents said that the government should be the one responsible for the data protection and data privacy rules, where approximately 25% said it's up to the individuals and approximately 20% said it's the companies. Now, that's naturally translate into countries and governments implementing data protection laws and regulations and standards. Now, more than 100 countries globally, they have implemented data regulations and data protection regulations, laws and standards. Also, GCC countries have been implementing data protection standards and regulations since quite some time right now. For example, if you see Saudi Arabia, in Saudi Arabia, we have the NCA and the SAMA regulations. Basically, for example, the SAMA regulations, it's a regulation dedicated to the financial sectors. Other countries in the GCC also implemented different controls or regulations, such as the National Information Assurance Policy in Qatar, the UAE Information Assurance Regulations, the Cybersecurity Standards in Oman, and the Cybersecurity Framework for BFSI in Kuwait. Now, if we take a look into these regulations and compliances and standards, we will come to know that there's a common theme between them, which is making sure that the data is protected from the creation of the data to the storage, transfer, and utilization of the data. Now, we have identified few points that are repeatedly, asked in different regulations. Now, the first one that we see here is the secure disposal of information assets. So once the data is created and once we don't need the data anymore, we need to have a mechanism how to make sure that the data is securely disposed, that will not occur from this disposal data breaches. So we'll make sure that once the data is not needed anymore and we need to dispose of it, we need to dispose it in a secure manner. The second point here that we have seen is the sensitive data classification. So organizations create data in multiple sensitivity, from public data to internal data to confidential data. Now, this data has to be classified appropriately, and protection controls needs to be implemented to this data based on its sensitivity. And that's exactly what the third point here is, restricting access to the authorized users. So when you have a confidential document or a secret document, we need to make sure that only the authorized users should be having access to these documents. Now, whether those documents are within the enterprise or these documents are outside the organization, we need to make sure that only the authorized users are having access to this data. The other point here that we have is the utilization of a robust cryptography system, meaning encryption system. And here we need to make sure that we are using the standards in the data encryption to make sure that our data is encrypted and protected no matter where it goes. Another requirement that we have seen in multiple regulations, which is the identification of the data owner, the ability to do audits on the sensitive data, and the accountability of that data. And here we need to implement certain mechanisms that enable us to make sure or to identify who are the owners of this data, what kind of activities are being performed on this sensitive data, and if there's a leakage, who is responsible for that data. And finally, we come to the secure data transfer and communication. So in multiple regulations, the one that we talked about earlier, they have mentioned that when the data is being transferred or during the communication, whether it's email communication or transferring the data through other systems, this data needs to be securely transferred. Now, when we say securely transferred, it could be encryption, it could be access controls. And we will see how does this affect later on when we're talking about the different controls that we can apply on documents and emails. So, how do organizations look over this change? Do they consider it as a hurdle? Is it something negative? Obviously not. Actually, 97% of organizations recognize the benefits of implementing data privacy controls, and they recognize the benefit into their data privacy investment. Now, how do they recognize this? You can see that these organizations, they could see that they have a competitive advantage. They grow their customer trust. Now their customers are trusting in these organizations because they are implementing the necessary controls to help and to make sure that the customers' data is secured. And finally, for organizations that they are starting up and they are looking for investment, they have also noticed that by implementing privacy controls and privacy investments, they have seen that there is more of an investor appeal for them. So most of the organizations, almost 100% of the organizations that implemented privacy controls, they recognize that there is benefit of it, whether it's competitive advantage, customer trust, or investor appeal. Unfortunately, data leakage will happen eventually, and you need to be prepared for it. Data breaches can really cost you a lot. So for example, here we can see that an average cost of a record that got lost or in a data breach, it's costing approximately $150 per record. And if you accumulate this, it's way much better to invest in a security solution, in a proper security solutions that will implement these controls on the document. So even when there is a data breach, even when the data is leaked, the data is protected. Now we can see that it takes time for organizations to identify a data breach. It takes organization almost 280 days. That's almost a year just to detect that they've been a victim of a data breach. And usually this detection is already late and the damage has been already done for the organizations. Now, one of the most important things when we implement data privacy controls and data security controls is the user resistance. Now, the user resistance is bound to appear and bound to happen. It is the internal battle between user experience and the data protection and security controls. Now, from an organization perspective, we need to make sure that the user experience is balanced with the data privacy and security controls. Now, we have seen most of the organization, they take a systematic approach to this. And what they are doing, they are optimizing the user experience when it comes to data controls, data privacy, and security controls. Now, how they are doing this? It's actually a cycle. They start, first of all, by creating a privacy UX team. A UX stands for user experience team. And usually when we talk about a user experience, our head goes to the design and the user interface. But here, mainly a UX design or a UX user experience, it's anything that has to relate to a user experiencing certain behavior, whether it's a technology or it's a process. So some of the organizations, they are creating this privacy user experience team, and their main role is to understand the challenges that the users are having and simplify the privacy jargons. So they create those privacy in a way which is simplified to the end users. And when it comes to the third step, while we are offering when we are implementing the controls, we need to make sure that we offer a little bit of flexibility. So most of the organization, they look into these controls as black or white, which doesn't really need to be the case. So in here, we need to implement or we need to customize our controls, and we need to offer more controls to our end users to have this flexibility. And finally, we'll try to make it as fun as possible. Obviously, it's not easy to make data security and data privacy controls fun, but there's multiple strategies that we can look into it to make this process a little bit easier to the end users. And actually, 90% of a survey responded that they are more likely to buy from an organization that have invested in a data privacy and security control. Now, going to this point, these are two of my favorite comics when it comes to the data protection. The first one is just a representation that in enterprise data is very difficult to manage and to restrict. Eventually, we will find our data going into places that we don't want it to be, right? Our data might leak, might be transferred, might be stored in different locations. But here the main idea is it's really difficult for organization to restrict the movement of the data, especially if they want to still be using mobility tools and collaboration tools. Once an organization use mobility tools and collaboration tools and migrating to the cloud, it's really difficult for organization to maintain or to restrict the data to stay within the organization. So this brings us to the topic that we need to have a security control that will be implemented on the data itself, that even if the data got leaked and we see our data in some other location that we are not expecting it to be, still we don't need to worry because the data is protected. And actually that goes directly to the second comic that I have here in the slides. The guy is saying, my doctor says my hair loss is caused by me worrying about data loss. Now, this is very apparent for data owner and administrators when they are maintaining data loss policies and managing it accordingly. So this process does not need to be difficult for the data owners and the administrators for the security solutions, right? So in here, we need to have these controls implemented in a comprehensive way to help and to make sure that our internal teams are able to manage these controls. Now, how does Seclore fits in this picture? As you can see here from the slide, Seclore is the remedy for hair loss due to the data loss worries. Now, with Seclore, it comes with its unified policy manager. We are providing organization with the right controls to maintain data protection and privacy. We integrate seamlessly with enterprise ecosystems such as security solutions like the DLP, the classification, and we also integrate with collaboration tool and analytics tools. And actually, this is providing organizations with a holistic view and control over their sensitive data. Now, when we say control, what do we mean exactly by control? So when we implement Seclore digital rights management control on the document, this gives us four controls parameters. The first one is deciding who should have access to a specific document or data. And here we can implement the controls based on an internal user or an external user. So you'll be having a mechanism how to restrict access to a specific data, whether this data is used or consumed internally or externally. The second control that we are providing is to decide what kind of rights these individuals have on these documents. Can they read? Can they edit? Can they print? Can they copy? Can they work offline? Can they take screenshots? Can they enable the macros? So all those granular controls, we will be able to restrict it to the documents based on certain identities. The third control is to define when those users should have access to these protected documents. Now, we know that usually when organization shares data with other parties, they usually make them sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. And typically an NDA, it's not really enforcing anything. It's just a legal binding between both organizations. But if we really need to enforce that once the users do not need access to this document, the document will expire, then we can use these functionalities. In this functionality, we can restrict access to a document based on a time period. So either we can specify a time frame, meaning within 5 days, the document will expire. So if I share a document with you, after 5 days, the document will get expired. Or I can specify an exact date and time. So when I implement a policy, let's say 30th of September at 3 p.m., the document will get expired at that specific exact date and time, and the user will not be able to open it anymore. And the last control parameter that we have is from where the users will be able to access these documents. And here again, we have two types of controls, an IP-based restriction and a device-based restriction. So in an IP-based restriction, typically if we want to restrict access to the data within the local network, we can do that through a range of IP addresses. And also we can restrict the user with the protected documents to the first device in use. So once a user opened or consumed a document on a specific device, that document will get locked to that device and the user will not be able to use this file from any other device. So these are the four granular controls that we are implementing on documents that are secured by Seclore, and this will give you total control on your documents, whether it's consumed internally or consumed externally. Now, with these controls, we do have also a very important capability, which is the auditing of the file activities. Now, we know that restricting access, it's really good, but also it's very essential to see the activities and the audit logs of the sensitive data. So we can see the activity details, who are the users, what kind of activity has been performed on the document. We can see the file details, the name of the file, the location of the file, and the other details related to the file. We can see the user's access permissions. What kind of permissions does this user have on this specific document? And finally, we will be able to monitor and audit the activity locations, whether it's the device name, the local IP address, or the public IP address. Apart from that, we do have a really nice dynamic watermark capability in our solution. In here, many organizations, they opt for this specific feature in our product. And this feature, which is the dynamic watermark. The watermark will be coming across the document, whether it's a Word document, a PDF document, an image, and these supported file format. And the great thing about this watermark is it's a dynamic watermark. So we can put static content or variable content, and these variables change based on the user accessing the document. For example, we will be able to display the classification of the document. We will be able to display the name, the username on the document itself. So the user who's opening the document, their name will be reflected in the watermark. And of course, the timestamp for this document. Now, if we just take a look into some of our customer base, how they are using this technology and what kind of use case they have. First of all, I would like to start with one of the largest manufacturing companies in KSA in Saudi Arabia, and the main thing that they want to protect is their intellectual property. So they do have intellectual property documents. They have financial data, and they have certain formulas related to the manufacturing process. And the typical use case that this customer had is they are expanding through the region, and they are opening multiple branches. And with this, it comes the sharing of sensitive data between partners and sister companies. And usually they are sharing their data via email. So they needed a solution to make sure that the emails going from the internal users to the sister companies and the manufacturing partners, this data needs to be protected by the end users. And if it didn't get protected by the end users, we would be having a mechanism to make sure that this data is protected from the gateway level. So once emails are actually leaving the organizations, those emails can be either protected manually or protected automatically. Now, another use case that we have, which is for two of the most sensitive financial organizations, one in the UAE, which is an investment organization, and one in Saudi Arabia, which is also an investment organization. And for both organizations, the typical assets that they want to protect, which is the future investment plans, the financial records, and the third-party financial audits. So these data is usually confidential, and they needed to have a mechanism how to make sure that this data is protected. Now, the use case for this data leaving the organization is that these organizations have a wide range of partner networks and a large group of interconnected organizations. So the data flows between different networks, and there's a need to share data with the investors and making sure that the investor data is secured as well, whether it's consumed internally or consumed externally. And one of the key features that has been used within this type of customers, it's the dynamic watermark. So they need to make sure that even if the document it's consumed from an external network or an external user, there should be a watermark on the document. So even if the document got leaked, the name of the user who opened the document will be there in the watermark. If someone took a picture of it, for example, and we will be able to trace it back to that user. And another key functionality that we have these two financial organizations or investment organization utilizing from Seclore, which is expiring the investment reports on demand. So once they have certain reports, they share it with some individuals or with some organizations, they want to dynamically and on demand revoke their access and expire these documents. And finally, we do have also one of the most critical government organization here in the United Arab Emirates. And the main use case here was to streamline the data classification and data protection process. Now, the things that this organization wanted to protect is the strategic plans, the action plans, and the intel and information that they gather, right? So this kind of data is highly confidential and highly sensitive. And we notice that employees are on the moves. So there is a risk of this data being leaked. And also the data is being shared with other government agencies. So we need to make sure that when the data is being shared, that this data is secured in the transfer and transit, and also it's secured while it's being at rest and at work. Now, the key functionalities that this specific customer used is the classification-based protection, which is the integration between the data classification vendors and Seclore as a digital rights management. In here, we offer a seamless integration between the data classification vendor. So once a document is being classified, that document will get automatically protected with a security policy by Seclore. Now, the same thing happened to an email. Once an email is being protected or being classified, based on the sensitivity level of the email, the document or the email will get automatically protected. Another two use cases for this customer, actually they were using two type of method to manage their digital assets or digital files. First of all is the file server, Windows file server. So they are using shared folders among departments. And they wanted the mechanism how to make sure that once a document is placed in this shared folder, it will get automatically protected. So Seclore gives functionalities or a component that has the capability to monitor a file server. And within the shared folders, we can implement a security policy that will apply automatically on any document placed in that folder. And also they were using SharePoint as another document management system. And in SharePoint, we also have a connector, whether it's SharePoint online, or a SharePoint Office 365, or even SharePoint on-prem. And the main idea about this integration is to make sure that once the data is leaving the document management system, it will get automatically protected upon download. And the great thing about this integration is the customer didn't need to create two policies, one in Seclore Management Server and one in SharePoint. So the Seclore Policy Server understands the permissions and the policies available on SharePoint, and we are doing policy federation. So the policies are mapped between the SharePoint document management system to the Seclore system. So even in the future, when a permission of a user change in the SharePoint library, it will automatically change on the documents that this user previously downloaded. So if I remove a user from a certain library, this user will automatically lose access to all the documents that he downloaded or she downloaded from that specific library. Now, with that, let's take a look into a quick demonstration, a quick technical workshop, just to look into how the solution function, how we can protect data, how do we integrate with data classification tools to provide a streamlined data protection, data classification, and protection strategy, and how to automate this. And we will see what kind of controls we can implement and how do the users interact with protected documents. So let's take a look in here and take a quick we'll take a quick look into the protection that we have by Seclore. As we can see here, I have multiple workstations, multiple virtual machines, and we will be demonstrating, first of all, how we can protect documents that are with the user. So me as a user, as an individual user, if I have a document on my desktop, how can I protect it? So it's as easy as right clicking. For example, I have this image file. It's as easy as right clicking on the file, selecting Seclore from the context menu, and this will open the protection window. Now, from the protection window, you can assign who are the users allowed to view this document, or the users that are authorized to have access to this document. So you'll notice that while I start typing the name of the group or the name of the user, it will be populating in the recipient field. For example, if I start typing a name, you'll notice that the name will be appearing to me here, and I can select either from a list, or I can even click on a group. So if I clicked on a group, for example, I selected internal users, and I want to share this document with all the internal users, but I want to specify certain access controls on this document. So in here, I can assign that all the internal users, they will be having access, but they have read access only on this document. Now, if I want to add other users with different permissions, I can do that on the same document itself. So I can just add a new recipient. From this new recipient, I can add, for example, a couple of users here. For example, I have a couple of users, and those users, I will be adding their permissions. For example, these two users, I'll be giving them the permissions of read, edit, print, and full control, for example. So if this document got accessed by those two users, they will be having full control. And if the document got accessed by any other user, they will be having read access only on this document. So once I click on protect, you will notice that the document will get accordingly protected and encrypted with Seclore. In Seclore, we use AES 256-bit encryption by default, which is complying with many regulation requirements when it comes to implementing a cryptography solution to encrypt and protect your data. Now, this is from a manual perspective when you have a document on your desktop. We do have also another mechanism, which is via email. So for example, here you see in Outlook, we do have an integration or a plugin for Microsoft Outlook. And this plugin will give you the ability to protect attachments directly from Outlook. We can either, for example, here, if we add an attachment, let's say a proposal document, all right, I will be able to apply the permissions that should apply on this attachment. And if I have some content in the document or some content in the email, I will be able to select this option, which is protect body, and we will be able to protect both the body and the attachments. Now, I have already sent a protected document to a couple of users. Now, let's take a look into how to integrate with the data classification, and then we will take a look into how the users will be able to access these documents. So if I go to this machine, I do have one document here. So if I open up this document, I will notice that there is a classification tool implemented on the system. Now, we do integrate with multiple classification tools. But the main idea that from the classification tool, if you add some content of the document, what you'll notice that if the user tried to save this document without selecting a classification value, they will be forced to select a classification. So we have configured the classification tool in a way that you will not be able to save or edit a document unless that document is classified. Now, the great thing about classification tool, first of all, they can force you to classify the document. And even if you select a classification that is not appropriate for this document, the classification tool has the capability to scan the content of the document and provide you with a suggested classification, or even force you to select a specific classification. So here, if I try to classify this document as public and I'll try to save the document, you will notice that I have received a notification error that this document has confidential content. And if we take a look, the confidential content here is predefined as board of director. So what we have done, we have added certain keywords. We can also add regular expressions. We can add patterns. And this will be used to scan the document and detect if there's sensitive content available within the document itself. Now, based on this, we can either just suggest it to the user and we can allow them to continue. We can also prevent them and we can enforce them to select the right classification label. So in here, if I go back and select, for example, secret or confidential, you will notice that the classification tool will be adding a header and a footer to the document. But so far, what we have seen the classification only. Now, where does the integration with Seclore comes into the picture? How we can apply protection policies based on the classification labels. Now, what I want you to notice that when I save this document, you will notice that the document itself, it has a classification icon. Now, notice what will happen to this document when I close the Microsoft Office. The minute I close Microsoft Office, Seclore has the integration with the classification tool, and automatically it will apply a protection policy to this document, and the icon of the document has changed from classified document to a protected document. And this is exactly how the integration works. Now, using this, we can make sure that every single document that the users are creating are classified properly, and protected based on its sensitivity. So whether it's a document created or an email sent, we will be able to apply these controls parameters to the documents and emails. So as you can see from this mechanism, it's extremely easy to streamline the data classification and data protection within a single flow. Now, I have showed multiple ways how we can protect the data, but once the data is protected, how the user will be able to access that data. So if we go to another user, which is a recipient, this recipient, you can see that they received a financial proposal document. If I click on that document or on that email, you can see that the content of the email will get automatically decrypted and will be displayed to the user. So in here, we have identified, we do have also an integration with Outlook. The plugin will be able to identify if you are an authorized person to view this email. And if you are the authorized person to view this email, the email itself will get automatically decrypted and be visible to you within the Outlook window without managing or without utilizing encryption keys. All this is happening in the background and without utilizing or sharing passwords and such these things. So the users will be able to log into the operating system. We can enable single sign-on for them with their Active Directory credentials, for example. And once they are logged in the agent, they are automatically logged in into the plugin in the Outlook. So in here, you'll notice that opening a protected email, it's as easy as just clicking on it. The same thing goes to the attachment. So if we try to open up the attachment here, as you can see, it's a Word document. The document will open natively in the native application. Since it's a Word document, it will open Microsoft Office. If it's a PowerPoint, it will open in PowerPoint. If it's an Excel sheet, it will open Microsoft Excel. And for example, if it's a PDF, it will open in Adobe Reader. But the main idea here is that once a document is open, the user will be having only the permissions that have been assigned to them. So in here, you can see that this user has read and edit. Typically, they will not be able to print this document. So if I go to the file and I try to print this document, you will notice that the user is not authorized to print this document. Even if the user tried to copy the content of the document, copy, and try to leak it in some other documents, for example, if I try to paste it here, you will see that I'm receiving a message says you're not authorized to copy this content. So in here, we are controlling the activities, what kind of permissions those users have on these documents. So even when the document is traveling to other users, you will be able to control what they can do with the document. And this is from an internal perspective, or from even an external perspective that has their client installed. And we also have an agentless solution that will enable users to access protected documents and protected emails directly from the browser without installing any kind of tools. Now here, if we go to the another virtual machine, which is for an external user that never heard about Seclore, that doesn't know what is data encryption, they just received an encrypted emails. So without prior communication from me, without giving this user an encryption key, without giving this user username and password, there should be a way for them to easily open protected emails and protected documents. So let's analyze how we can do that. You can see that the user received this financial report email. And in the email itself, we say that this is a protected email, download and open the attachment. So if I download this attachment and try to open it, we'll notice that the attachments will open in the browser. And this page is totally customizable based on the organization. So we can change the logo and the look and feel of this interface. Now, we are giving an option to the user. Do you want to open it in the browser without installing an agent? Or do you want to download a Seclore application and view the file locally on your system? So the user might not need to install an agent. They can just click on open in the browser. And you will notice before opening the file in the browser, we would need to authenticate, or the user needs to authenticate in order to have access to the document. In here, we have multiple ways of authentication. So the user can authenticate with their email address. Seclore or the policy server will generate an OTP, a one-time password, or a security code, and they will send them the security code. Once they implement the security code, they will be able to create a password. Or we can use some single sign-on service providers or authentication providers, such as Microsoft and Google. Since I am a Gmail account user, I can just authenticate with one click using Gmail. So once I click on Google, since I am already authenticated in Gmail, I'll have the authentication and the email is displayed to me, as you can see here. Now, this is a very powerful email interface because I will be able to reply from here, and my reply will be an encrypted reply as well. So even the third party, which is outside your organization, that does not have encryption solution or a protection solution, when they reply to this email, this reply will be encrypted as well. Now, this is when it comes to the email communication. What about the attachments that I have sent with this email? So if I go back to the email and download the Word document, if I try to open it, it will open up in the browser. If I click open in the browser, you will notice that the document will be rendered in the browser without downloading or installing any kind of agent on the system. And the great thing here is that the restrictions and control are still applicable on the document while rendered in the browser. You can see that we have displayed watermark. The user, if they don't have print permissions, they will not be able to print. And even if the user tried to copy the content from here and paste it in some other locations, they will not be able to do so. So they will receive a message, you're not authorized to copy the content. So even if you have a use case that you need to share something confidential and sensitive with an external recipient, you can still make sure that this external recipients can do only the authorized activities that you have provided them. Now, once I have all these activities and I have all these users accessing my data, how can I track the activities and how can I know who are the users that has access to my sensitive data and what they are doing with my sensitive data? So in here, if I go to the user who protected this email or document, I can go to the Outlook. From Outlook itself, if I go to the sent items, I can see two new options. One is track and another is revoke. So if I click on track, it will open up the tracking window, and here I can see the list of activities that has been performed on the document. So in here I can see the previous activity that the document was attempted to be printed. This proposed document was attempted to be printed by a user called Anna, and also I can see that Linda opened up the proposal as well. So I can see the highlight activities from the documents that I have protected. If I want to go a little bit more in details, I can view these logs in the browser. It will open up the management console, and from the management console, I will be able to drill down into these activities to take a better look into it. For example, I can click on this specific activity, which is print. In here, I can see the file name. I can see that this is an attempt to print. I can see the local IP address, the public IP address, and the computer name. So this will give me total visibility on the activities that are performed on my sensitive data, and this will give me an insight that if a user is trying to do unauthorized activities, then they are planning to leak the data. And since I have that insight, I can right away, for example, if I go to the user, you can see that the user is having access to this document. Now, once I have that insight that this user is trying to print the document from this IP, from this system, I might need to revoke their permissions. So in order for me to revoke their permissions, all what I need to do is actually go back to the owner, go back to the email that I have sent. From the email itself, I have an options called revoke. The minute I click on revoke, it will give me the list of users that have access to this document or to this email. Now I can select an individual user from that list and I can revoke their access. Now, once I have revoked access to this specific user, if I go to the to that user and I try to access the email once more, you will notice that the email will not be decrypted anymore. And here it says, this is a protected email. You do not have access to it. Even if I try to open up the Word document that is already in my inbox, right? If I try to open that, you'll notice that the user will not be able to open it anymore because the document got revoked and the user should not have access to it anymore. And the great thing here that even if the user does not have access, there is no need to bother the administrators. There's no need to create different or to modify the protection templates. All what the user needs to do to have access to a document that they don't have access to is just to request access. So here the user can they can just request access. For example, they can say, give me access. Once they have requested the access, an email will go to the owner of that document or the owner of that email. Once that owner approved this access, then the user will be having access once again. So if you go back to the owner of that document or the owner of that email, they will be receiving an email right now. As you can see here, they received an email that said this specific user, Anna, she's saying, please give me access on this specific document. So the minute I approve it, once I have approved this request, if I go back to the user and I'll try to open that attachment once again, the attachment should be open for the users. Without changing the policies, without sending a new file, without modifying the protection policies or templates. And in this way, you can make sure that in your journey for data privacy and data control, you will be able to implement a solution that will help you protect your data into multiple vectors, whether it's a document management system, whether it's an email communication, or even it's an integrated with a DLP or a data classification tool. Once the data is protected, the solution also will give you an ability to track the activities that has been performed on the document. Once the activities are being tracked, you will be able to revoke or modify the permissions of these users even if they are not within your network. So in this case, you have total protection and total control from the minute the document is being created to the document is being stored to the document is being transferred and to the document is being utilized and disposed. And with that, that's exactly what Seclore helps organization with. And hopefully within during this event, you'll be having the Seclore stand. Please feel free to come by our stand and look into our solutions and our portfolio. And me and the team will be there in the stand. If you have any other questions, any type of queries, if you want to see something specific, me and the team will be able to assist you accordingly. Please don't feel shy, and we're waiting for you in our stand. Have a nice day.